guess it's time to start talking about questions, huh? Everybody know we have a test on Thursday? Okay. Who sent me some questions in the email over the weekend? Somebody did. We'll see if this answers your questions. If not, you can ask them again. The quantity equation says that if money growth increases, inflation falls. What do we think? What is the quantity equation? So, if you increase the growth on the left-hand side, what do you think happens on the right-hand side?
Inflation falls.
Why would you think that?
There's no money in the market, so don't need to be
So,
making
are
as much
prices
profit
gonna go
as
up or
it
down if there's more money out there?
it's just go up, 'cause
In
we-
fact, what did your key principles say? The government puts too much money in circulation, prices rise, or there's inflation. So that one's false. Another way, I guess my own personal quantity theorem says what? If I foolishly get off on the second floor rather than going to my damn office and grab 2 bags of chips and a thing of Oreos, what happens to the amount of me out there? Goes up, right? The quantity of me increased because I added more calories to me that I didn't need to. Irritating myself for getting off the elevator and going out there to see the remains of your business day. So, right, more the quantity of money gets bigger, the price level gets bigger, the money growth increases, the inflation rate rises. GDP includes an adjustment for pollution created during production. What do we think? False. You know, I realized these questions in some ways could confuse people. I'd ask them for years, you know, about household production or pollution, all the things that are on that list. But it's sort of a weird list because it's a negative list. It's the things that should be in there that aren't, right? If you make, back in the old days, before government competed you out, if you were a Mississippian and you made $1 million a year as a bookie, what was true? Did you make that $1 million? Yeah. Were you able to buy cars and a house and things with it? Yeah. But we didn't have a good way to measure. Again, there are economists out there that try to measure it, but it's not included in the official GDP stats. Or included in the national income stats. GDP is the dollar or market value of all goods and services produced in an area during a particular time period. True. Don't let the area stuff confuse you. Why do I need to say area now? Well, we sometimes try to estimate the GDP of states in the U.S., Alabama, etc. And then we can't say country because of the damn Europeans, right? They have the Eurozone out there, and so they have, you know, there's a GDP for the Eurozone. The total value of a purchase of a used car is counted in GDP. What do we think? False. Right? You can't produce used things during the period. Why did I say total value? Trying to make my students not miss. No, not taxes. Because the value of the salesperson's services are part of this period's GDP. So I didn't want to have a big quibble about that. So some part of it is included, but not the total value of it. True false purchases on the New York Stock Exchange count in GDP? Oh, I have that on the other. False. The New York Stock Exchange is a market for buying and selling used stocks, stocks already in existence. Unemployed people looking for a job count in the labor force. True. Under what circumstances is it embarrassing to miss this one? It's embarrassing to miss this one if you got number 16 correct. All right, what does that say? It says, well, by rote, I'm adding unemployed and employed together and calling it the labor force, but I'm not thinking about it enough to answer a true-false question on it, right? I just mechanically know that that's how we did it on old tests, and I'm not thinking about it. So it does help if you think about the things that you know a little bit in answering these. Frictional unemployment is due to changes in the economy, like goods being replaced by better goods. What do we think? False. Why is it false? That's structural unemployment. Frictional unemployment is due to what? People changing jobs. People graduating without a job and looking for a job for a while. And of course, cyclical unemployment is due to what? Fluctuations in the economy. That's really the type we're going to talk about from here on. That's the type of unemployment that doing a good job in economic policy can reduce. Higher unemployment compensation leads to more frictional unemployment. True. Right? You're going to search longer if you're not starving. If you're getting hungry, what are you going to do? Yeah, maybe take the first job that's available. If you're going to lose your house, you take the first job that's available. As I said with my doctor example, we want the doctor to search long enough and get a doctor job and not be flipping burgers. Among the winners with unexpected inflation are people on fixed incomes like retirees with a pension plan, for the private pension. It's true. Private pensions don't go up very much, if at all. They're not legally obligated to go up at all, so, you know, if you're getting $1,000 a month in a private pension and you have 18% inflation, you're down to 82% of what you previously had in purchasing power. When someone wins money, they're not really gaining interest until they have been compensated for inflation during the time of the loan. True, right? Again, when you lend money, what do you want? Your money back. Then you want compensation for inflation and or taxes that you owe on the interest. And then finally, you're getting interest after all of that's paid. Inflation is the rate of change at the price level. True. I could have also written PT plus 1 minus PT divided by PT. That's the equation we have for it. A fair and dependable court system leads to higher economic growth. True. Why? Why? What's the court system have to do with economic growth?
They help decide which policies to lean towards, whereas if business wants to do something.
Yeah, it's really more the government that establishes those You know, it's the legislature and the administration. What's the court system do? Allows you to keep your, whatever you make, free from arbitrary decisions by government to take it. Right, can the government pass a higher tax and take some of it from you? I guess they could take we could have our nursing tax and tax all nurses 100% of their income, right? Because you nurses are caring people, so you're gonna go ahead and be nurses and care for people. So if we taxed 100% of your income, we'd get all that revenue and we'd still have nurses, right? Some of you aren't that caring, right? Probably you are pretty caring. Maybe we should have a higher tax rate for being nurses because they care. But you'll work and try to get your money if the government can't arbitrarily say, I'm taking all of your wealth. The people of some countries started out richer than others. That's not true. People everywhere started out equally poor. Right? You go back far enough in our family tree, and what's true? We're hunter-gatherers. Everybody in here came from a hunter-gatherer. And many people aren't in here because why? There was a high death rate among hunter-gatherers, and if your relatives 50 generations back die, you don't exist. So every single person came from a hunter-gatherer. And being a hunter-gatherer, what's true? You're not particularly rich, right? You're hoping to find what?
Food.
Some injured animal that you can take down, right? So if you get hungry enough, I guess what do you try to do? Take down a polar bear, right? Most of us lose in that, yes.
But, so that question's more focusing on like way back when, because if someone were to be born in like America and then some moved to Japan, they would be richer than someone who was just born strictly in Japan just because the US currency is more than the Japanese yen.
Well, that's not strictly true. There's something in international economics called the law of one price. Basically, a pair of jeans in the United States and a pair of jeans in Japan have to cost the same thing. Now, there can be tax rate differences, but in general,
But that's to third world countries. If you go to Mexico to buy the same pair of jeans, it's gonna cost less. Because I went down there in the 80s and bought a pair of Guess jeans for $5.
Were they
here
Guess
they're-
jeans?
Yes.
Well,
It was a
here's
Guess
the thing.
store. That
Here's the
store was
thing.
Guess.
Here's the thing. If you go to, now it is true that the person selling you the Guess jeans in Mexico,
It was a store.
but the person working in
Yeah.
the store makes less than the person working in the store here. And maybe there's some price discrimination, I don't know. Do we have any women who qualify? I see one or two. Right, if you buy your Guess jeans in the juniors, if you're small and can buy your Guess jeans in the juniors rather than the women's department, you can pay a lot less. But in general, the law of one price has to work, because what will happen? What should you have done?
Moved to Mexico.
No, not move to Mexico. What should you have done? Bought 100 pairs of Guess jeans in various sizes, brought them back to the United States, and paid for your trip. Back in the old Soviet Union days, when they wouldn't allow Levi's in the Soviet Union, jeans were very hard to come by, and Levi's were very popular then. People would buy a $10 pair of Levi's, 2 or 3 of them, take them through customs, sell them for $100, and the $100 were the rubles in the Soviet Union, and pay for a good fraction of their trip to the Soviet Union. Not that many people wanted to go to the Soviet Union. right? They're powerful economic forces. And, as I said, you should have bought 100 pairs. Brought them back, you would have had a free trip to Mexico. And if you're rich or just not entrepreneurially inclined, other people are entrepreneurially inclined. Other people will do it. And, you know, maybe you can't bring back 100 pairs, but what if you bring back 5? You know, the custom people aren't gonna know. And let's get back to the question, because I sort of veered away with the law of one price stuff. But, yeah, everybody started out poor. You go back far enough. And that was really the whole thesis of that chapter. You know, sort of one of the things that everybody started out poor, and there's sort of 2 ways you can get rich. What are the 2 ways? You can create a lot of value yourself, I guess, or you can steal. And I think, as I said in here, who do you think got more wealth?
Those who stole.
Huh?
Those who stole.
Bonnie and Clyde or Henry Ford?
Henry Ford.
Yeah, not the,
But if you look at like Britain and their colonization, they kind of gained most of their wealth through that.
well, there are people, you know, there have been many arguments about colonization. What are the, again, that day I talked about, what are the richest countries, what's the richest country in Asia, probably? China or India? What's the richest country in sub-Saharan Africa? South Africa. What's the richest country in North America? The US. What's the richest country in the Caribbean? Jamaica. What do all those countries have in common?
British colonies.
They were British colonies, so it's not completely clear which way the wealth went. You know, now, you know, you lost some of your wealth to the British, but you gained the British common law system, and that seems to work. What's the richest country in Oceania, in the South Pacific? Australia. Another rich country in Asia is Singapore, although it's a postage stamp country. So, you know, you could say the British had something to do with Saudi Arabia, but that's not where their wealth comes from. Their wealth comes from oil. So, you know, again, just factually. And why don't you make more money by stealing than by making people better off? What did your grandmother teach you? What advice did your grandmother give you about making friends or maybe even dating?
Treat them like you ought to treat them.
Yeah, you'll catch more flies with honey than you will with vinegar. All right, if you want to become fabulously rich, what do you need to do? Make people better off. If you open a car repair place and overcharge people, what will happen? You'll go broke. Remember, did I give the example about the fuel pump in the car when I first moved to Spanish Fort? I had a car that was misbehaving. I took it to a place. It was, I think, had just opened, but I mean, I just moved there. This car place, the closest one to me, they said I needed a new fuel pump, and here'd be the price. I called the dealership to see what the fuel pump cost, just to see if I thought the price was right. The car was recalled, the fuel pump was recalled. The dealer towed the car into the dealership, changed the fuel pump for free. Now, I don't know whether it was crookedness or just inexperience on the part of those people. They didn't last in business very long there. So, you know, right, you can't make people worse off. If you want to stay in business, you have to make people better off. if you're a nursing graduate and all your patients are dying, what will be true soon? We'll be falling back on that mortuary science minor I told you to get, because all the baby boomers are dying, right? You won't be a nurse. To encourage long-run economic growth per capita, society must increase its population. False. In fact, it doesn't make much sense, right? If you increase population, if you have to then increase income even faster. In the steady state, production or GDP stays the same in every period. True. Right, the steady state. It's part of why, I guess, why people in the 19th century called economics the dismal science, right? They were afraid we were gonna reach a steady state. They were just talking about the steady state and there would be no growth. Economies may not converge due to differences in savings rates. True. Right, and that's just from a list, I can't, but if you save less than you have, then your investment will be less. You'll have a smaller investment function. So we got this data. The labor force is what? Well, it's the employed plus the unemployed, so it's 96 plus 4. How many people can answer that without a calculator? Good for you. The unemployment rate then is what?
100 million.
The unemployment rate is, well, the answer would be 100 million for the first one. The unemployment rate is 4 million divided by 100. What percentage could that possibly be? 4%. I think your numbers are a little harder on this test. They're not hard. You could do it without a calculator. But I don't think it adds to 100, as I remember. The labor force participation rate is what? The labor force 100 divided by population 16 plus 150. So what's the answer? D, 0.67.
It's supposed to be 0.67.
Well, 67%.
No.
We don't want 0.67%. Then the answer would be wrong. Then it's none of the above. So yeah, 67% or 0.67. Using the data in Figure 1, real GDP in 2010 prices is what? Well, I think I made there's a couple of typos on these tests. I think that should have been GDP in 2021, and it's 20 trillion. And our price index in 2020 to 2021 is 125 times 100. So it's 20 divided by 125 times 100. Or divided by 1 point, yeah, because we just have to do this. And we get 1, 125, 75, 750. Is that right? 0, 5, 7. So, equals 16 trillion. Or B, right? Everybody get that? You gotta make sure you account for the 100. But right, if you get an answer of 0.16 trillion, that should remind you that you forgot the 100, right? I'm not trying to trick anybody with 100, but that's just the way they do it. I think as I conjectured in here, I think they did it originally after World War II so they wouldn't have to print the decimal place. But then sometime in the 60s, the government got so big that they were printing then they carried it out to additional decimal places, so it didn't matter. And if there are two goods, ham and cheese, price of ham times the quantity of ham plus the price of cheese times the quantity of cheese. The price of ham is what in 2019? $2. Ham consumed is 2,000 units. Plus the price of cheese is $3. And it's 500 units of cheese. So we have $4,000 on of cheese plus $3,000, $1,500 of ham equals $5,500 in GDP. That also might have helped you with, remind you that 3 was true, right? Again, if you think of what you're doing, we say there's only 2 goods and you're adding up price times quantity. All right, everybody happy with that? All right, so we've got this graph. First of all, what are the variables on this graph? Anybody? Anybody, what are the variables? Goods and capital. So if I ask you a question about it, the variables are the things that are on the axis. Guess what everything else is? Fixed on the graph. So, and it is a little bit odd. Usually you think of one variable on the x-axis and one variable on the y-axis, but clearly you can get investment or depreciation or production on the vertical axis. But production is some amount of goods. Depreciation is some amount of goods wearing out. Capital goods wearing out. Investment is addition to capital goods. So they are all goods on the vertical axis. So that's, I mean, it's important to know that despite the fact that you can take 3 things off of it, they're all, so all 3 things can vary, but they're all goods. They're all the same thing. You can't really have 2 things on the same axis. two different things on the same axis. All right, so in figure 2, the depreciation rate varies. GDP or goods is a variable. Capital or K is fixed.
All of the above.
Well, is capital fixed? What did we just say? The things on the axis are
Variable.
variables. Depreciation? What did we say in class about depreciation? We'd really like to get at how much this wears out this class period, but we really can't. You know, so at first I say we deal with the real world, the accountants deal with an artificial world, the IRS, but in reality, when we go to do something, we have to assume something about depreciation. You can't measure it exact. We drew a straight line. What does a straight line imply?
It's steady.
A steady, yeah. So the depreciation rate is fixed, even though the amount of depreciation can vary because it's a straight line. And is GDP or goods a variable?
Yes.
Yeah, so we get B. If technology increases, then the ideas increases, then,
B.
yeah, what happens to depreciation? The amount stays the same, right? We're still under there. What happens to investment? It stays the same. All that happens is that we produce more. Call that prime. And of course, the steady state capital is this capital underneath the intersection of depreciation and investment. Why do we know that's a steady state capital? Because the capital stock doesn't tend to increase or decrease. That's why it's a steady state. Right? If investment is greater than capital being worn out, you get more capital. If investment is less than the amount of capital being worn out, you get less capital. Only where they're equal do you get does the capital stock stay the same. So that makes the steady state is K3, and steady state output is, it's not Y1 because output comes from the production function, so you gotta go up to this production function. This one doesn't really exist. I drew that in to answer a particular question, so that's not on the graph. So it's Y4. And if capital were K4, we just talked about it, what's gonna happen? It's going to shrink down to K3. Right, it's gonna go down to the steady state. Why is it gonna shrink? Because depreciation is Y2 at that point. Investment is some amount less than Y2 at that point. So if you're wearing out more capital than you're producing, then your capital stock shrinks. So it's gonna be D. I'm not D, B, decreases. Okay, any questions about that?
What
Yes,
was
sir.
22 again?
So basically, I forget which, I think it was 23. Basically, it's just once depreciation goes higher than investment, that's usually where you'll find the steady state at.
The steady state, the steady state is always where these two curves equal. Because if you're here, you'll go back down to here. If you're here, you'll go up to there. Right here, you're investing more than you're wearing out. Here, you're wearing out more than you're investing. You gotta go to there. And then yours was, which one, 23?
22.
22. B. Right, the way we shifted it. And you should be able to say, look, by the way, why do we use the little d, the little Greek d there? Because we've already used d for demand, so we don't have d left. But you should be able to see, you should be able to vary any of these curves, right? I shifted this curve up, and what happened to the steady state? Right, if I shift this curve up, right, the steady state stayed the same, we just got more production, right? On the other hand, if I take this curve out and I increase investment because we save more now, then we get an increase in the steady state capital and an increase in output. The Y2, let's call it. Right, so you should be able to see by moving any of those curves, if we, if for some reason the tropical countries of the world, concrete wears out more quickly in the heat, maybe, or whatever, maybe in general, steel, iron, they wear out more quickly and they have a higher depreciation rate, then you get a lower steady state and a lower output. Right? You should be able to manipulate any of those curves. This is the hardest thing on this test. This is a pretty easy test. And it's very important for you to do a good job on this test for getting out of this class, because things are going to get a little harder. Particularly if you did a good job on the first test, you can get 2 tests and then you could drop the third if life doesn't go so well. But even more particularly if you didn't do that well on the first, to make up for it, you need to do well on this test. So any questions about this before we go? And you can hold your questions till we go over another example of it on the second test. All right, the third graph. You need to do well on this graph this time. Why? Anybody know? It is so easy, I'm not giving it to you on the final. I'm making a promise. You only get one shot at this. It's too easy. Okay? Of course, I screwed up the first question here. A trough is what? Forget the local maximum part. A trough or a local minimum. A trough is what? Point U. A recession is what? T to U, when the economy is going down. An expansion is U to V, when the economy is growing. Much of the time during your life when the economy is growing, people will think we're in a recession because they won't yet be seeing it. It takes a while to see it when we come out of a recession. From point T to U, what do we expect to happen?
Cyclical unemployment to increase.
Expect cyclical unemployment to increase. The business cycle is going down. Cyclical unemployment is what's going to be affected. Institutions that encourage economic growth include, I don't have answer C, I didn't print it out. What's answer C? Or did it not show up on yours either?
It didn't show up on mine either.
I wonder why. Anyway, political instability, property rights?
What was C?
I don't know, but it's probably wrong because political instability is wrong and property rights are correct. So it is B. And again, if you're completely flummoxed by these graphs, it's not so good for the last test, but on this test, what's true? You need to make sure you know all these lists of things that encourage long-run growth, right? Those are verbal things. You can get them right. Okay. Do the other one, I guess. I'm too easy on you guys. Inflation occurs when the government prints too much money. Everyone agree with that? True. Price indices are biased by changes in the quality of goods. True, right? The computer computer you have, right, the CPI is based in 1983 to 85. What do you think's true about the quality of the computer you have compared to what the personal computers one had then?
That's a lot better.
Yeah, way, way better. What do you think's true about the stereo equipment?
It's a lot
Musical
better.
equipment, yeah. You know, what's true about stereos now compared to stereos in the 1950s? But you ever see a console stereo? They had these big wooden pieces of furniture that they
It's
built.
a whole,
Yeah, huge thing. I guess that meant more to people in the days of boom boxes, right? Although what's true, right? You have these little Bluetooth speakers that are as good as the boom boxes. These people, you know, you had to be a big guy to carry around a boom box on your shoulder. Now anybody can, you know, you have a little one in your purse and toss it out and make lots of noise. Purchases of stocks are counted in GDP. Nope. False. Yeah, the New York Stock Exchange, for example, is what's called a secondary market. It's for used stock that already exists. Investment bankers place new issuances of stock. But that's for finance classes later on. GDP includes an adjustment for pollution created during production. False. I need to change that question up for you guys, right? Keep asking the same question I have.
freebies.
It's so hard, so hard.
That's good.
Yeah. I'm morally obligated to change it.
It took me 2 hours to understand it.
I mean, I read it said true when I read it initially, so.
Yeah.
Well, that is that.
They couldn't go get us, so you know.
No, yeah.
Or leave it the
As I
same.
said, with all of these, they are a little backwards because it's a negative list.
Tell us you're gonna change it and then don't, and we'll all get it wrong.
Well, hopefully not. But the people in each country in the world started out poor. True. We were all poor. A larger government implies higher economic growth. False. Not necessarily true. It does it probably at some levels, right? You know,
To an extent, but then you can get too much
you
coverage.
can get way too much government easily. But on the other hand, for you to start a business, what kind of government do you need? What do you want from government if you're thinking about starting a business?
Probably a capitalist government.
No, you don't even care about that. There's number one thing you want from a government if you're gonna start a business, the first thing you want. Even before, probably even more important than a fair judicial system. You want a government that can keep other people from invading, right? You don't want the Japanese coming over and bombing your port. Right, if you were thinking of starting an export business in the summer of 1941 in Hawaii, if you knew what was gonna happen, what would you have done?
Moved it somewhere else.
Not started an export business, right? People were going to try to come there. Among the winners with unexpected inflation are real asset holders. True. If there's unexpected inflation, property holders usually do better. Poor college students that buy their ramen noodles early do better. Have more ramen noodles to consume. Discouraged workers are those in dead-end repetitive jobs.
False and true.
Huh?
I said false and true.
No, it is false. I know why you're saying false and true, sort of the common usage of discouraged workers, but the government defines these things. We have to live with government definitions. We've got to be speaking the same language, so when it comes to unemployment calculations, unemployment rates, employment rates, etc., discouraged workers aren't in the labor force. So we've got to allow for that. In the steady state, consumption grows in every period. False. If Production doesn't grow in every period, then consumption can't grow in every period either. Structural unemployment is due to people changing jobs and cannot be reduced.
False.
False, that's frictional. So I guess on these two tests, I matched up structural and frictional with the wrong definition. I probably won't do that on your test, but there probably will be a question about one of these types of unemployment, right? I mean, there's only 3 of them. The definitions are pretty easy. That should be something everyone gets right. Unemployed people looking for a job count in the labor force. True, by definition. To encourage long-run economic growth, the government can protect intellectual property rights. True. Again, what there's basically 2 things they can do: subsidize research and development or protect intellectual property rights. But of course, intellectual property rights, you might see the question in terms of trade secrets, patents, copyrights, trademarks. I probably won't ask about trademarks much, because I'm sort of so-so on that. Trademarks are just a way to communicate. What do the Golden Arches communicate to you?
Charles and hamburgers.
We will make your kids shut up. Right? I think that's the big attraction of McDonald's, is your kids will shut up. So, it might be bad food, but at least your kids will like it. The unemployment that can be reduced by a better economy is cyclical unemployment.
False.
True. Question is, what can the government do to make the economy better? That's what the 3rd part of this class is going to be. Right? The government, frictional unemployment, the government can't do anything about the number of people changing jobs. Structural unemployment is more of a long-run thing, right? What do you do? What do you do with the unemployed mechanic when all of you guys switch to electric cars and there's no need for a guy working on engines, right? That potentially could happen. I don't think it's going to happen right away, but potentially that could happen, right? There are a lot of people that repair internal combustion engines. So what's that person going to do? They're going to have to get retrained. It's a longer-term thing. A good economy alone won't take care of them, but a good economy will take care of the auto worker who's, whether it, right? The auto company is going to make electric or internal combustion, whichever they can sell, right? So the auto worker will be back on the assembly line if the economy improves. Or if it gets worse, they'll be off, they'll be laid off. Honest government hinders the growth of GDP. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Economies may not converge due to different fertility rates. True, that's one of the things on that list. That maybe one of the things that causes a lower income trap is that people have so many babies in some countries. Honest government hinders the growth of GDP. Nope, it encourages it, doesn't hinder it. Now you might say, if you were a cynic, what might you say?
There's no honest government.
Yeah, well, we don't know, we've never seen it. But relatively honest is a relative term, and it seems that the less corrupt societies have higher GDP growth rates. All right, figure 1, this is an old test, right? Almost back from COVID days when the unemployment rate was higher. I do try to keep the numbers semi. What's the unemployment rate?
8%.
Actually, let's go down to 18. What's the labor force?
It's gonna be
92
92.
plus 8, 100.
million.
Again, as I warned you, I made it a little harder, but I mean, it's just arithmetic. And then the unemployment rate is 8%, 8 divided by 100. And the labor force participation rate is what? 100 million, the labor force divided by population 16 plus. 200 million, So 50%?
So 100 divided by 16 times 100.
No, it's 100 divided by 200 million,
Okay.
right? For the labor force participation rate? It's just the labor force divided by the number of people, 16 plus, the number of people who could be in the labor force.
Okay.
220 prices in 220 GDP in 2010 prices. It's, well, you don't really need this one, because you're not gonna get this one. But it's, 750 billion divided by 1.25, or 125 times 100. So, 125 into 750 goes what? 6, 0, 5, 7, oh, 60, yeah. So it's 600 times, and then you take 6 times 100 equals 600 billion. I was being lazy back in 2020. How was I being lazy? GDP was already in the trillions, but I was still doing it in the billions because I'm old. So I finally decided that once we got to 10 billion, I think I had to change it to maybe 20 billion at some place. I got 20 trillion, once we got well over the trillion, into the trillions. So yours will be in the trillions, right? I mean, I've gotta make it make some sense. It won't exactly match what GDP is, but some. And then we have two goods again, ham and cheese. And what do we got? The price of ham times the quantity of ham plus the price of cheese times the quantity of cheese. What's the price of ham? $2. What's the quantity of ham? 2,000. Plus the price of cheese, $4. Times the quantity of cheese, is it 500 again? Yeah. So we get 4,000 plus 2,000 equals 6,000. And what's the way you can screw this up? What are those other answers gonna be on your test? What are they on this test? I matched the wrong price with the wrong quantity. Or use the same price on both quantities. I give you reasonable alternatives, just to see if you're doing it correctly. All right, any questions? Do all these seem pretty reasonably easy? I guess I didn't do the hard ones on these tests. The one hard one, index numbers. All right. In figure 2, capital is fixed, labor is a variable, depreciation equals investment at the optimum or steady state.
C.
It's C, right? Capital is clearly variable, it's not fixed. Labor is clearly fixed, not a variable. Technology increases and the production function shifts up. Again, I sort of asked the same question on both tests, so I'll probably ask a different one on yours. But you should know how to shift those curves around, as I said. The steady state capital stock is what?
K2.
K2. Steady state production is
Goods 4.
goods 3.
3.
And if capital were K1, what's going to happen?
Increase.
It's going to increase. It's going to go to the steady state. All right, again, this is the hardest thing you got to get on this test. Anybody got any questions they can see right now on it? It's not that hard, but, you know, in some ways, you know, unfortunately in economics, there are a lot of things that are maybe more intellectually hard, but mechanical to answer. So you might answer it without fully understanding it. But I should write essays. Again, One shot at these, they're too easy. A peak is L or N. I only gave you L, fortunately. So answer A. A recession is M. No, a recession is from L to M. C.
Not bad.
And, you know, typically the authority is saying something out loud, I just agree with you. That is, people do have a real tendency to agree, right? I could tell you guys all sorts of wrong things, and the authority of shouting it confidently has to get you to agree.
It's relaxing, right?
I had some radio show in Houston call me this morning and offer me the chance to be on tomorrow at 7 a.m. Yeah. I said no. I said, you've already heard me talk a little bit on this, we're good. So did we do expansion from M to N, D? From point L to M, we would expect cyclical unemployment to increase again, right? And to encourage long-run economic growth, the government can issue and enforce patents, protect copyright, subsidize research and development. All the above. So, do these tests, and hopefully your tests, cover what we covered in class? Good match, yes, sir?